Yo, what's happening? We're here.
We're here. It's Wednesday, April
Yeah.
29th.
Hey, nice sweatshirt. That's the new gear, right? For World in
Thanks,
Conversation.
boss. Yeah,
Established
World in
that.
Conversation, established 2002, and it's got like a nice little gothic.
Oh yeah, very cool, man. Yeah, that's nice. I like it.
Shout out to the WinC design team.
Yeah, very
If
good.
anybody's interested in a shirt, hit Sam up.
Man, someday we're gonna sell them, sell merch. You know, it's kind of strange. Not strange, but I mean, it's somehow. I don't know, man. You know, for those of us who are watching, who are on the stream, who are a little older, who have some kind of a better understanding of what I'm about.
Can you bring the
to
mic up a little bit?
How about that right there?
Yeah, that's nice.
And we'll have a better understanding of what I'm about to say. But it's just so strange seeing that established 2002 because, you know, I was 42 years old when we started the organization. You know, Lori was 38. It seemed like we were halfway through our careers, or it seemed like it anyway at the time. And it's just so weird to think, you know, that was 24 years ago, and which seems forever ago. I mean, it seems like so long, and yet it seemed like I was really mature and advanced and far into my career when we started that, you know. So it's just so interesting to have such a long career. What's up, Joy?
Sammy Bammy.
Well,
Are you guys live streaming right now? Or not yet?
Now
Yeah.
we're live, my friend.
Oh.
You are live.
This is our girl Joy.
Hey, streamers. Or you're the streamers. Y'all know what y'all are. Like, comment, subscribe, share.
Oh yeah, hey, make sure tell people to subscribe because I never do that.
Yeah, she's also a part of this gear, so shout out to
very
Joy.
cool,
I
man.
did that. Blood, sweat, and tears and back and forth emails.
Yeah,
What did you say when you came to my office? You wanted a drink? Yeah. There's no soda water left.
I know.
Okay, I'll get you soda then.
Oh, thanks, Jojo. She's gonna grab me a drink.
So anyway, that's yeah, it's just so strange to have so much time go by and to be, you know, doing something for so long. Yeah, it's a privilege, and it's a shock to see that number, you know, established 2002, right? Man, I just can't. It's hard to hold, you know. And then the idea that the idea that it's all going to end. I mean, everything ends, you know. So yeah,
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, awesome.
Maybe. Sure, I'll take both.
Abundance in Trump's America.
There's no water.
Lots of abundance, man. Yeah. Yeah.
It was that when that is pretty crazy. I hear what you're saying, just like everything that you guys what you started and like where it went, you know, and like where it is right now and how we're in the midpoint of like possibly more growth.
Yeah.
And was 2002 even the beginning, or was Race Relations Project 1990?
No, that's when we started Race Relations Project that morphed into World in Conversation. But but you know, I have been teaching Social 19 at that point in time for you know, for I guess 11 years in 2002, right? So which is a long time. I mean, it's so long. It's just so fascinating. It's so unsettling. On one hand, you know, we can say, oh, it's pretty cool. But at this stage in my life, in my age, when, you know, you see the ending, right? I mean, it in a way that I didn't see back then. But I mean, you know, I see. It's just, it's very, on one hand, it's cool. It's really nice to have been part of something for so long, to see something that's still going. And it's also, it just means that you're closer to the end, you know what I mean? At least my role in it, my part of it or whatever. And so I don't know, I guess I'm feeling very like nostalgic is a really nice thing, but nostalgia is a lot more uplifting. Uplifting is not the right word, but it's just softer when you're in your 40s and 50s and very early 60s. Then when you start moving beyond that, it's you know, it's in your head, it's in your heart, but it's like, whoa, it's also, here we go, man, for the great journey. So
Yeah, it's like the way you're seeing like the physical manifestation of it, like in its current place. It's like,
yeah.
I don't know. It was what you're saying is just making me think about how as I'm growing older, and then it's like I'm in the moment of me getting older and like at a point where there's like important moments of my life at, you know,
Yeah.
30, but then and I'm like feeling so much anticipation, but then I look over to my right and I see that my dad's about to turn 50. And then
50. I
so
can't even remember when I turned 50. I don't even remember that. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing, right? Like it's cool. It's such a privilege to be able to be alive for so long. I mean, it's a great privilege to be able to be alive and be healthy and and it's awesome. And you know, when I get to the end of a semester, you know, like this, right? This is, you know, August will I'll finish. It'll be 38 years, or pardon me, 43 years for me, right, of teaching. And I get very nostalgic. I mean, I really think about it because, you know, the students in the class yesterday, they only know their own experience. But what I know is their experience plus 42 and a half years before them. And
Mhm.
I mean, my students now, I have many former students who are retiring, and just like, oh man, uh, that it's just, I mean, it's cool and it's big. Yeah, it's really big. So
Yeah,
anyway,
it's
that's my
man, that's so just man, I feel you. It's like I don't feel you, you know, I hear you, you know, and I can't be in your position, but it's really interesting how like this is reminding you of like it sounds like you're saying it's reminding you of like your mortality
for sure.
and life and
Yeah,
like the blossoming and then the end of the blossoming
yeah. No,
and
it's
it's so
definitely,
deep. It's so deep.
yeah, it's so deep, man, and it's cool. Like it's really important. And you know what's interesting? Yesterday in class, you know, I gave people the opera. You know, I reached out to 6 students I kind of been, you know, the list is 200 of people who applied, almost 200. Well, I think it was actually about 203. And I reached, there are always a number of students who I hope I can get to. A lot of students, it's just names, you know, I mean, it's people, they just, I mean, you never know who's going to just sit on that table and say some really cool stuff and who's going to say just cool stuff. But some people are going to say really cool stuff, right? Um, for the moment, I mean, everybody will, under the right circumstance, with the right questions and the right class and the right topic and so on. But sometimes it has to be just a good match.
Aligned. Hmm.
I always have people I'm hoping to get to. I'll highlight their name in a certain color and be like, okay, I got to remember. I want to try to work with that person or invite them up. But anyway, so I picked 6 people. 4 of them, 3 of them got back to me right away, and then a fourth got back to me. Two I never heard from. And I tried to reach out to a couple more, but they didn't have questions, you know. And anyway, so 4 of the people who volunteered, they knew ahead of time to ask a question, so it wasn't just spontaneous. You know, they thought of those questions the day before, and maybe they changed them. I don't know, but the point is they thought about it. And so I asked. So it's interesting that one of the questions was about death, okay, which I find really fascinating. And another question is 2 of the questions were about God and religion, right? Like, because these are these are the big questions that are, that people are thinking about, right? I mean, yes, it's fascinating. Death, and then God and religion, So, it's not. Then, I mean, obviously, people have questions about the subject matter and so on, but mostly, whatever the subject matter is. I mean, because in Social 19, the subject matter is wide ranging. I mean, but I just found it super fascinating that that the death, the very first question is really about death. What's going to happen, So anyway.
What was the basis? Were they just supposed to write you a question, or
No, they were just supposed to come up with it. So when they came up ahead of time, I didn't want to ask them in the moment because, in the moment, the question was, listen, my question to them was, do you have something that you would ask me? Something from the semester, from class, from something that you stumbled across, something personal about me, something, whatever, that you got one chance to ask me a single question. What would the question be? Do you have something? And a couple of students responded back after I asked them, and they said, "No, I really don't have anything," which surprised me a little bit. But I think they probably thought the bar was really, really high, like they had to have a really, really cool question or something, and the bar wasn't high. But anyway, yeah. So that's what they came up with. Now, me, if I were sitting in the classroom and Sam Richards was the professor, right? I probably, it's very likely I would ask him a question about death or about God or something like that. I wouldn't ask him a question about who knows? I don't know. I don't know. Like his
and
yeah. Yeah.
and for you, it sounds like is this the reason that you're focusing on those questions right now? Is that because right now a lot of these things are like death or God or things that you've been kind of you're always pondering it, I assume, but like pondering more
Yeah,
recently
well,
and you're in a
I'm always
or
pondering it. But at the end of the semester, it's particularly on my mind, because I'm just thinking about the endings, and endings are and beginnings, but you really are the same thing. It's a circle. Life and energy is a circle. So the beginning and the end and the beginning. So yeah, I'm always thinking about that. But I was really actually uplifted a little bit, quite a bit actually, that's where the students' minds went. That's a good thing,
right.
to have them asking that. And the
Yeah.
one kid, the first kid, the one who asked about death, he wrote in his, one of the reasons I wanted to kind of use him toward the end of the semester is because what he wrote in the application, the volunteer application, was because the final question is just something, okay, tell us something about you that you think would be valuable for us to know. And his was that I'm really working hard to try to not be right all the time. One of his parents is very liberal, one parent's very conservative. He's just kind of all over the place, and he's a thinker. He seemed, and I could tell, in talking to him, he was a thinker. But he said, I'm trying to figure out and work on not being right all the time, thinking I'm right all the time, and needing to be right or correct all the time. So I really appreciated that. That's a big that to me, that's how you're going to grab my attention if you say that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he was the one that asked that question about death.
About death. Yeah. What do you think happens? What do you think's going to happen? Like he's really struggling. He's really not struggling with it. He's thinking about it. And that's cool. That's a really nice. Yeah. It's cool, man. I was thinking about it when I was his age. I don't know that. I honestly though, if I were 20 years old, would I think back to my mentor, who, was very, very wise, very brilliant, old school scholar. Um, I don't, I don't, and I had a chance to ask him a lot of questions because I spent a lot of personal time with him and visited him at his home. He lived in Detroit. I lived in Toledo. I don't, but I never asked him. There were certain questions I didn't think to ask like that. Like, what do you think happens when we die, man? What is that? It's such a, it's just such a beautiful question, to be asked, right? For me anyway, to be asked that question, for someone to think that, to pose that to me is really, really, really nice. I
And so
enjoy
that's something
answering it. Yeah.
you'll be answering that tomorrow.
And, yeah, wait, say that again. I was going to respond to a question.
Oh, no, it's okay. You can. I was just going to say, so you're answering that question tomorrow.
No, I answered it yesterday.
Oh,
We don't have
yesterday. I didn't see class.
that was our last class, yeah.
Got it.
And of course, I told him I didn't know, but I had some sort of sense of things. I don't know. I don't have any idea, actually. I mean, I have it. Yeah, I do my best, right? I do my best to research people, at least go to the other side. I seem to go to the other side and come back, but I don't. In the end, though, who knows, man? Anyway, Paul 108 says our Penn State sociology class is more about is rather than ought at the upper division or graduate level. Man, it depends on who's teaching. It depends on who's teaching. There's, there's some really, I would say half of all professors at a place like Penn State are in the ought category. I mean, are people who are not certain of a whole lot of things, and they're certain of some things, right? But when you push them on it, they're gonna dodge it a little bit because they're smart. They're really smart. They've got a lot of wisdom and they're smart. So, and in that sense, it's a lot less of the is. If I'm reading your question correctly, so a lot more like somebody like me, who is less certain of some things. I mean, we know what the data are, but the data are, it's like groups of people, right? We're always dealing with the mean in sociology. So we're dealing with averages. So the people are more likely to X, right? On average, people do Y, right? Like we know that. So if you have to learn how to talk about life or reality or data or people or humans or groups as means and averages. And then, of course, it's like, it's much more difficult. You have to speak in ways that, like, immigrants, right, who are new to the United States or who come to the United States and don't speak any English are more likely to X, to what is whatever X is. But like, well, that's not everybody. It's like, we see an average kind of behavior all the time, and so that makes things like sociology really very difficult, because you can't we can't. I had a really good example the other day I was using, but we can't say certain things,
So it makes it difficult because you can't like speak with certainty on just because it's a mean and there's outliers.
Yeah.
And
It's the outliers that's what throws us off, right? But we want to, science is about, or just living life is about causality. We want to understand what the causal forces are in the world, right? If I have a stomach pain on a regular basis, I want to try to get the source of that stomach pain. So I'm trying to find the cause of the stomach pain. So I'm going to try to try to isolate one single thing. Is it from eating, tomato sauce or greasy foods or oil or whatever, right? But bread or gluten or whatever, I try to identify one thing, and that's that's the easiest. But then you know, maybe it's two things. Maybe it's oily foods and milk, you know. So it's maybe it's a lactose issue as well as an oil issue. It's like, oh man, okay, well, but maybe it's when I eat the oil first before the milk product, or vice versa, you know. So then it gets really complicated. Well, if that's true, now we're going to talk about human beings who get stomach pains after they eat or before they eat or whatever. It's like, but in the end, we're going to try to put these groups of people together so we can say something about causality. And then, but you know, you start breaking it down and it becomes like, oh my God, you know, like who's more likely to have an eating disorder and anorexia or bulimia or something like that? Like who's more likely? What the hell does that mean? You know what I mean? Well, we look at people with who are anorexic and or bulimic, and then we start to see, are there commonalities between them? And then we start adding up those commonalities, and then we say, like, we lump those commonalities into something that we will call causality. But those commonalities by themselves, I mean, there's nothing you can say about everybody who's anorexic or bulimic. And so that's the problem of sociology, you know. So you have to be, so going back to Paul's question, right? You got to be really careful and you have to, yeah. So this is, now I'm responding to is, you know, facts, context, methodology. I'm considering it as foundational to the is. The problem is with the is that with the example that I just gave, there's so much subtlety in it, and there's so much problem. There's so much potential to just pick the center ground of the average, and then just make us guesses about everybody in that group based on that average, and that's where you go wrong. Bro, do you get that? You see that, right? It's like facilitation. Yeah. It's like what works in one group. It's like, oh my God, okay. It works. Something works in three groups. You have three groups, and the facilitator does something, and the groups go really well. But that doesn't mean it's that thing, you know?
Right. And I think it's because, I mean, there's like you can see general themes, but then, you know, even within those general themes, you can see like there might be a change within a group, and that's due to like a certain like, you know, like there's like special cases within. I think, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's very it's very cool. It's very I mean, it's a challenge. I will dare say, I got an email yesterday from somebody from Europe, a sociologist from Europe, from Switzerland actually, and she was asking about just teaching method and, you know, kind of different things. And I was saying, you know, I responded and I said, well, you know, I dare say that when I was, you know, this kind of going back and forth with students, the specific question was just about challenging students and the ability to challenge them and the willingness to challenge them, and how it gets difficult after a while because you're challenging everything. And I was saying, well, you know, it used to be much more difficult for me to do that because I didn't have anything to challenge them on. You know, like I just didn't have enough knowledge, especially in my first 10 or 15 years of teaching. I just had nothing. And it's probably only been in the past 10 to 15 years that I feel that I'm much more comfortable doing it because I have knowledge, like I have insight, I have experience, you know, I can say things about the world. But the second reason is because I'm just trying to, because I used to think that teaching involved me giving information to people. Well, if that's the case, then I got to decide of the sort of unlimited stacks of information in the world, I got to pick out the things that I think are the most important in a given moment in time. Well, that's going to be shaped by whatever I think is right or true or good, you know. And then that's where you run the risk of the very high risk of, imposing your own vision on the world, because I'm just going to select out certain things. And even if I say, well, I got to be fair to both sides. What do you mean both sides? There's an infinite number of sides. So I got to be fair to all of them. Well, you can't be fair to all of them. It's not possible. To pick a class out and say, I'm going to talk about inequality and I'm going to talk about everything. It's like, you can't do that. And so when I was teaching in that way, then it was much more difficult to challenge everybody, because I was more prone to only challenging the things, A, that I knew about, and B, that I thought were wrong or needed to be challenged. And the things I thought were wrong were the things that I didn't know about, or whatever. Right. So it's really, really interesting.
And so that's the moment that I think you talked about that transformation when you had a conversation with it was like a Buddha, or like,
No, the
or
guru in the
the
Buddhist
guru.
monastery. Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And you had a few questions, and
Little
then
did he know that he was freeing me up to make my job on one hand a lot easier, on the other hand a lot more difficult. But he was definitely make my job more entertaining, because what he said was, if you remember, I have to learn how to learn from my students.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's funny. Yeah, so on one hand, yeah, it's easier and it's more difficult, so yeah.
Do you have like you're saying like that's the problem with averages within I don't know where I'm going with these questions, but when you were talking about like with sociology, and like the problem with it, um, since you've lived 42 years as a teacher in sociology, like when you're done, when this is all said and done, like where would you like the study of sociology to go?
Whoa,
Yeah,
man. I think
would be a tough
mostly it's
question.
yeah, that's a really interesting question. So one of the things that has happened in the world of sociology, right? We collect data. We collect as much data as we can, and we we man, it's so interesting. We take those data, whatever the data are, right? I mean, it's different things. Well, let's just look at, man, I mean, something like, homelessness, the rise or decline of homelessness, and then we take that and we got to cut it up, right? We have to decipher it. We have to try to figure out what it means. And the problem is, once you do that, what in the term in the research world is, you reify the world, right? You take something that's complex, like human behavior, some concept like homelessness, you got to break it down and to say, what do you really mean by that? And what's becoming homeless really mean? What do we mean by a home? And what's it mean to be unhoused? The word now is unhoused. I mean, people come up with different terms for things. And then you define it, and then you got to break it down, and all these things. And, then we want to count numbers. And in the world of sociology, counting, the modern day sociology is the counting numbers that feels like it's most valuable. If you can put it into numbers, then it just feels like you got something you can we would say hang your hat on. You got something you can talk about. Otherwise, you're just throwing postulations out there, right? Like, I can go and observe people who are homeless and I can interview them, but I got to take each one and I got to look at all the factors and forces that led them to be where they are. And I got to count those up, and I got to really, dissect it to understand exactly what happened. Was it them? Was it somebody else? Was it, I have a friend right now who has a brother who's, just kind of dealing with a little bit of mental illness of sorts. And he can't make the right decision, but you can't make a decision for him. And so he's not making a decision to take these medications that he really needs to take. And the problem is, he's going to make a bad decision. And because you can't just step in and be like, you got it, you have to take the medication, and he's not thinking straight. So it doesn't that doesn't help. And so it's very likely that he won't take the meds on a continuing basis, and he's going to end up homeless because you can only hold somebody together for so long, and you can't lock them in a room. And so therefore you got to study that. So now we're trying to study homelessness, but each case is very different. And so like in the world of sociology, it's very difficult to say something about the problem of unhoused people, what causes them to be unhoused, to be homeless, what isn't it about? Well, all these things, right? And then it's just much better if we can count it. And so that's a long way of saying that's where the field of sociology goes, into quantitative methodologies. Let's count things. But when we do that, you lose the essence of it. You gain something, you lose the essence of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Anyway, how about that? Yeah.
What'd you say?
No, that's been a battle all the time. But that's where you want to go. It's the science of sociology, right?
And so for you, like your class is the more like qualitative work, the qualitative aspect of sociology, where you're like away from numbers and you're more like in the experience. You're in the thing, you're learning, and students are learning about the things that can't be counted always.
Yeah.
And we're back. Damn, I think the universe has decided I need a new computer. This computer is great though for everything else. So somebody else can take it. We are
I need a new lab.
The irony, man, is that we could probably go to Walmart and buy you a computer that would be strong enough to do all of this. You know what I mean? That's the irony.
Maybe I just need a streaming only computer. That's my problem.
Yeah. Well, it's really it's odd, honestly. I mean, that's what it is. We'll work it out. But this summer we'll make it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, we were talking about the quantitative world of sociology, So we as a field, it seems like the most important or the most active members of the field have shifted toward deciding that it's much better for us as a discipline if we can count more things, because then you can make more statements about how things should be or ought to be, or how to make things happen. I mean, it's like in medicine, right? We imagine, yesterday, and I just randomly gave the example of people eating these or drinking these 64-ounce containers of soda on a regular basis, selling them in stores, right? And it would appear to be a really bad idea, right? I mean, it's unhealthy. Soda's unhealthy. The sugar, the whole 9 yards is just not a good idea. And we know that on average, people that drink a lot of soda are less healthy than people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we're going to decide, like in New York City, a decade ago, they banned the sale of these big 64-ounce sodas in fast food restaurants and 7-Elevens, in places, right? Hey, yeah, I have a, yeah, I'm back. Hey, I'm curious about that question. I think that, Alex Coleman, you're asking, it's like the question I got yesterday was my favorite place. And be curious to hear from some other people what your favorite places are. And, I often, people want to ask that question because I think it's a really, it's a good question. And, I mean, it's what I often want to ask people, but, there's a point in time when, man, it's really difficult to answer that question. For me, Lori and I, sometimes we talk about what our favorite place in the world is, and man, there are just so many probably the most favorite place is just sitting on our sofa in our living room or on our deck when it's really nice out. Yeah. What's interesting about 119 is a lot of schools don't have these kinds of open conversations. Well, they might. Some do, I'm sure. We don't know about them. You have thousands and thousands of high schools in the U.S., and we have, I don't know, what are there, 3,000 universities and colleges, and so many of those are. There's so many classes. Hundreds of thousands of classes. So there are lots of open conversations that happen with small groups of people. That's for sure. Probably a lot fewer that happen. Definitely many fewer that happen in large groups of people, and virtually almost none that happen in 800 student auditoriums, and definitely not live streaming. But I don't know. I think a lot of people would probably do that. Like, they don't imagine it. Well, what stops people is the idea that they can't. People who teach can't help but have the thought that they have to give information out. That's what teaching is. So as long as you have that idea, you're stuck. You can't. What's the open conversation, right? It's just this meaningless back and forth with students. What appears to be meaningless anyway, and or it's seen that way. It's seen as something that's frivolous, or it's just wasting time. Students are, it's kind of like in high school. I remember. It was always fun if we could just get the teacher to talk about random stuff and see how far in the class period we could go to waste time before we had to get down to the actual boring lesson, that what was perceived to be a boring lesson anyway. And so I think that so many of us, we see learning in that way, and certainly in a large group, right? That it has no value because you're not being challenged, you're not thinking about things. But in Social 19, obviously, it's a little bit different because I am asking various, questions that are going to challenge people to think about things. So, yeah. But anyway, I don't know. I think it would be probably a very good idea if more people were open to it. That's for sure. But anyway, Paul, 108, anyway, about distrusting methodological sophistication a great deal. And can you distrust theoretical sophistication completely? Yeah. The problem with the problem with counting things is you can get lost in the count, and then you forget what it is that you're actually trying to count. And then when we're counting large numbers of things, we rely very heavily on the mean and the averages. In one way, shape, or form, we're trying to pinpoint an average, because if you're going to get the causality, you want to be able to. You got to be able to figure out what's the likelihood of that thing, of one thing causing another. And then, you have multivariate analysis, so you don't just have one or two or three variables. You're going to have many, many variables, just like the example of homelessness that I gave earlier. And, how could you possibly really understand the infinite dynamics that lead, individuals to be homeless, and then, group them all together so that you can say something about a larger group, right? On even averages. How do you do that? But again, you got to try, because if we don't try, we're not going to be able to have policies. That's the nature of it. You got to formulate some kind of policy to address housing issues. So it's like you got to come up with something. You got to count something. Anyway, I would do that. Chambray said, I was talking to my therapist on the concept of trust as understanding in linguistics. I was curious what you think. Do humans need to have some trust in being able to communicate? Definitely. I think trust is essential, right? Just if nothing, it begins with trusting that this other person can comprehend what it is that we're saying, which is why it's so difficult to communicate with people when we have language barriers, because you can't trust. You have to trust that they have a sense that what you're speaking is understood. And if you don't think that it's understood, then it's hard to continue to speak. And then if we want to say something that's deeply meaningful to us, well, then it's really a problem if we're not able to trust that this other person sitting across from us or whoever we're speaking with can comprehend what it is that we're saying. This really meaningful thing, So it just starts right there, and then it goes beyond that, just to even comprehend, which is like people who come at conversations from a very different way, which is why like the Myers-Briggs test is really interesting, because you have this opportunity to see, or a way to see, that human beings are just the scaffolding of our beingness is different with different people, and it's not. It sometimes it has nothing to do. It has very little to do with their upbringing, and it's just people are just different. And if you haven't done the Myers-Briggs test, it's really worth doing, because you learn a lot about sort of the essence of who we are, which is pretty cool. Let me see, I'm just looking at some questions here. If there is a question. So many current forms of communication are very limiting. Yeah, text doesn't. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, I agree with that. That there's a lot of forms of communication are limiting, and it's good, right? Like, it's really awesome that I can just text somebody really fast and get information out. But it's even just like this chat, right? Like, we don't. Yeah, there's short snippets of statements that there's so much behind a statement, a thing that, different things that some of you are saying. There's so much behind that. It's like, oh my God, like, how do you like, you just have to, it goes quickly, right? But you really have to write out so many things. And then the problem is, by the time you really write out a very considerate thought, the chat's already moved up, and like whoever you might be even responding to, it's gone, So this kind of communication is exceptionally limiting. It's fun for certain things, right? It's fun to have these connections, but it's very limiting. Question. So, LDQ Keto fan says, the thing about me is I question everything. I don't know why. I just do so. I feel like your teaching methods make it easier for me to ask those questions that sometimes aren't asked. Yeah. I think that I just have gotten. Well, one thing that really helps me is that the more people that watch. First off, the more students in class who speak up, and the more that I hear from them, the more people who watch, and then we come in and we have office hours, and a lot of people are in office hours, and the people are saying lots of different things. The more it really digs in for me that the people with very different perspectives are watching, are listening, and they're either sitting in the room or online. And so therefore it's such a quick knee-jerk reaction for me to start going down one path and then kind of stop myself and say, well, wait, hang on, but we could also go over here, right? And so I did it yesterday a couple times, and that's a really good thing. It's not so easy to do if I don't ever listen to my students and have an idea that they have different perspectives, or if no one's watching, because I just go down a path. It's an easy path. It's a well-worn path, and I make it happen. But now I have to stop myself, and then I stop myself, and I have to come up with another way of seeing something, right? So, you know, like yesterday I gave the example of that Michael, who's that guy? Michael, I forget what his name is. I said it yesterday, who was saying that, you know, South Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, East Asians in particular, all Asians really, he's saying like, yeah, they just don't, they're never going to be Americans, they're not Americans, they just don't, they don't get it, they're never going to assimilate, they don't want to be Americans, and they shouldn't be, and we should just sort of stop even giving them the opportunity to it. It's really was just, God, what's that guy's name? Damn. Anyway, it's just really, just in my humble opinion, just really, really dumb, man. You know, and really not very smart of Trump to repost that on. It's just not a very good idea. You're the leader of the country, man. You got tens of millions of Asians here in the United States, and probably tens of millions who are deeply assimilated into the U.S. and call themselves Americans at every level. And like, you don't post things like that. That's just a really bad idea. But anyway, so I had to stop myself. Well, but hang on, but there are a lot of people who think like this guy. So like, wait, what could they possibly say? So I go down a path. It's like, yep, that's I don't like that. It's just sociologically, it's just a bad idea. But I got to back up and I got to say, well, but there are got to be some really thoughtful people who think like that, so what's the argument that they're making? And then I have to kind of, I would never do that. If I didn't know that there were people watching or people in the class who had the same idea, I wouldn't bother to do that. But I do know that there are, and so, well, now I got to make a thoughtful kind of comment about this, because I have to, because they're thoughtful people, you know. So anyway, that's kind of a thing. I appreciate that about myself, or about how I've shifted over time, and yeah, you know, it's a lot of work sometimes, you know, and also sometimes I feel like I'm not, maybe, I don't know, maybe not being true to what I really think is important or valuable, but I do it anyway. So, all right. Let me see. Yeah, LDU Quito Fang. Well, every high school would probably benefit. But, you know, the problem would benefit from more of this. But the problem is, high schools are also dealing with young people who are not fully mature, right? So you gotta like lock people down to a degree, more than they want to be locked down. And so then there's also part of that, you know, I don't know. I mean, I had one class in high school where we just sat in a circle and we talked about all sorts of, I don't know, it was human relations was the name of the class. And I don't think we had any tests. I don't think we had anything. We just sat in a circle and talked about all sorts of things. I don't remember what we talked about. I know this guy was really trying to get us into a place of ascension place, right? A place of feeling, a place of where we linked our thoughts to our feelings, and we took some kind of social response and psychological responsibility for ourselves. But, you know, we were 14, 15, and 16 years old. I mean, how do you do that at that age in a working class high school? So, so I don't remember anything we did, but what I do remember is the feeling when I was in there of being relaxed and appreciating the fact that we were attempting to have some kind of conversation, and that this guy actually really did care about what we thought. And there were no tests, there were no papers, there was nothing, man. All you had to do was show up, and you got the A, so you'd show up and listen. And I remember that, but I remember nothing, not a single thing that we talked about in the class. Not a single thing, but I remember that I felt like I was wanted, or I felt somehow that I belonged, and he made sure that everybody in the class felt like they belonged. So that was probably a really, really good thing for me. All right. All right, listen. So I'm gonna probably kind of, as we say in some American version of English, I don't know, scram. Scram. I'm probably gonna log off in a hot minute. But what we've got for now, just so you know, I don't know if so the class is over. We're gonna stream some. I'm teaching a summer class for 6 weeks, starting at the very end of June, and we're thinking about stream. It'll be small groups, but we're thinking about streaming some of that. I don't know how much we can, but we're thinking about streaming some of it because I think it would be really interesting, because there's small groups of people, so it might be kind of fun to do. And probably we'll have some office hours in the summertime too. We're trying to do some new things. I'm trying to figure it out. You get a bonus class. Yeah, a bonus class. Anyway, so that's where we're at. I don't know what'll happen next week. My guess is at some point in time, I'm definitely gonna. How's it feel to finish another semester? I was talking about this earlier in the when we first started streaming. It feels nostalgic in a way, and it feels it always feels kind of strange, because it feels like I'm coming up against the end of something. You know, it's the end of a semester, so symbolically it means something, but it also is yeah, I feel it. It feels heavy. It always feels kind of heavy. Yeah, like everything that begins has to end, right? And the ending leads to new beginnings. So it's just a circle of life. And I always see that as an opportunity to reflect on what. Yeah, I'm being very vague, but it's like, man, I often, when I get to the spring and I get to the end of a semester, I often feel a little bit of a kind of a depression of sorts, or at least like something, right? Because you don't know if it's going to start up again. And yeah, so that, but at the same time, it feels really good. We had a successful semester. Jeff put a lot of data up yesterday. Lots of views, lots of people who are thinking, right? Who really are enjoying. I got so many emails this semester from people who are just thanking, being thankful for the opportunity to have a window into a classroom, in the U.S. And yeah, so that's pretty cool. That it's really nice to be able to provide that. People really use it to bounce off of. So that's pretty damn cool. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, the withdrawal. That Eric, that's why you just got to go golfing, I suppose. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. You can ask a question. Keto fan. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Ask. Okay. What would you say to a teacher who wants to do similar teaching method as you do? What would your advice be? I would say, well, just jump in and start asking questions, but be aware that no matter what people say in the beginning, whatever people say, you have to accept. This is the thing. And if it's something that you just find like, oh, it's really difficult to accept, then you just got to you have to have your key list of questions. you know, like that you got in your pocket. You know, it's like, all right, well, so how'd you get to that idea? You know, how'd you get, what, you know, what led you there? You know, what do you see? You know, these kinds of things that you try to pull more out of people to sort of get behind what they say, especially if someone says something that's really, that you find really abhorrent. You know, like, for example, you know, every immigrant, every undocumented immigrant should be rounded up and put in a detention camp and then sent back to somewhere, right? I mean, like that. So many people in the U.S. find that pretty unconscionable. Many people don't. I mean, obviously we have, you know, but some people do. It's like, well, if someone says that, then the goal, you can't, what's hardest for people is you can't say like, oh my God, that's, you have to say, oh, that's interesting point. How'd you, take yourself back to when you first had that thought, or let's talk about how you got there, or how you came to see that as the thing that we should do, and that kind of stuff. Like, you really have to do that, and if you don't do it, then you don't build trust, and if you don't build trust, you're never going to get people to talk about the things that they actually think, see, and feel. And that's what's the hardest thing to do in teaching in this kind of way. So that's my answer to you, man. Yeah. Yeah. Let's Sam Cook. Yeah. No, that's the. But you know, the problem is, you know, well, the good thing about teaching doing it in a really large space is, you know, that no matter what happens, I know that I'm not going to get everyone to think like I think. So even if I say, like, you know, something's wrong and you should think about it this way and my way and that kind of thing. Well, no one can do that. Like, you won't get everyone on your team. So it's like, oh, it makes it easier to not even try. Like, oh, why would I try? Look at my hair. It's a mess. All right. All right, man. Now I think I'm really kind of, I'm thinking I'm ready to bounce here. It's yeah, I've had a really, really long couple of days. So so here's what's up. I'm gonna I will bounce, turn the stream off, and I appreciate everybody, and really thanks for being part of it, and we'll be back. We'll do something next week, and then after that we're just gonna try to figure out a method and something for the summertime. So yeah, it's really nice. So thanks everyone, and really be well, and we'll make it happen. We'll figure out. Okay, you all be awesome until we are convene again. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.